So today, Dr. Kapoor would take us through a topic on co-branding with data. So with this, I welcome Dr. Anuj Kapoor to start the session. And I request all of you to type in your questions that you might have in the chat box, and we'll take it up towards the end of the session.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Mayank, for the introduction. A very good evening to everyone. I can see there are around close to 20 if we remove the ones from SME, around 16 or 17 of them. So very good evening to everyone. As Dr. Mayank introduced, my name is Anuj Kapoor and I'm a faculty in the area of marketing. Mayank, am I audible?
Yes, you are very much audible.
Perfect. And could you please let me know if my slides are also visible on the screen? I have just shared them.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So the topic that I'll be talking about today is co-branding with data. Why co-branding is important? What are some of the outcomes of co-branding? I'll take a couple of examples to explain you the concept. And also I'll take one live case on which I had particularly worked somewhere in 2018 as part of my PhD, wherein we had worked with one of the private sector and one of the largest private sector banks in India and created a co-branding strategy or a framework for them. The image that you see is also one of the examples, which is of very recent times, wherein Starbucks have sort of co-branded with Label Life in order to create a very specific niche set of products for the Indian market. Now, a couple of quick facts. Firstly, if you look at the top priorities for companies, and that's a survey that was done by Ernst & Young in 2017, one of the elements that came out were strategic alliances, which is collaboration. In today's time, wherein boundaries of multiple organizations are blurring, a bank is no longer a bank. A bank has to collaborate or create partnership with e-commerce players, with payment gateways. Similarly, a payment gateway cannot function as a standalone payment gateway. It has to have network, which is with regards to banks or other e-commerce players in order to excel. So strategic alliances or collaboration is becoming mainstream as you're going day by day. Again, to give you some view about how important the term is, a survey was done by Deloitte in 2018 of the top 30 companies by virtue of their revenue. And the term collaboration appeared only once in the annual reports of these organizations. And when I say annual reports, it is specific to the strategic initiative, a broader theme. If you look at 2018, 81 times is the occurrence of the concept or the theme, which is collaboration. Why? Because that is the way forward. And as I said, over a period of time, collaboration has become mainstream. It is very important for every organization to collaborate with other players. The topic that we'll be working on today is all about co-branding. So let's very simply look at what exactly is co-branding. And if you look at the definition of co-branding, what it says is synergy of combining two well-known brands into a third unique branded product or a service. So in very simple words, whenever two brands who are very distinct from each other come together to create a third product or a third service having its own set of brands, that is called as co-branding. There are multiple forms of co-branding, but in the interest of the time, I will not like to get into the details. But as of now, just assume whenever two brands come together, they create a third product, which is a co-branded product. Few examples of co-branded products in India. If you look at Paytm co-branding with Visa. Historically, co-branding as a concept started with co-branded credit cards. Started in the United States and in the European market and subsequently came to India as well. In India, there are plenty of banks who create co-branding efforts or co-branding marketing strategy with some of the other players in the market. Amazon versus Visa, again, is an example of co-branding. Why? Because Amazon on one end comes together with Visa, which is one of the payment gateways. And then as a result, they create a third product, which is an Amazon Visa credit card. Similarly, a credit card for Amazon Prime members powered by Visa, which is again a co-branding. Very recently, MasterCard collaborating with Apple Pay, again an example of co-branding. So the idea is partnering every way in order to increase your awareness, increase your visibility, and cutting down on your marketing costs. I could see there are a few questions. What I'll do is I'll take all the questions towards the end because I cannot see the chat menu as of now since I'm in the full screen mode, but I'll be more than happy to take all your questions towards the end. Look at example of Dell or let's say HP. Every brand which is Dell or HP has a processor inside, which is Intel inside. If I ask you, will you go and buy a laptop which is let's say a Dell or HP? If it doesn't have a processor, you'll say no, I will not. Why? Because of course it has to be powered by a processor. Again, an example of co-branding, how two brands come together to create a third product. People will also not buy only a processor. They need to have a system to support that processor. One of the recent examples in India is Spotify and Starbucks. Now, Spotify is a music stream platform. And the whole idea when Starbucks and Spotify came together was to create a music ecosystem wherein the employees of Starbucks are given premium subscription to Spotify, wherein they can curate playlists. And consumers entering into Starbucks can access those playlists using their Starbucks mobile app. Again, if you look at the idea, it's about Spotify, one brand coming with Starbucks on the other, creating a third product. It's an experience altogether that they're doing. Now, it is quite possible that Starbucks might not have or might have a set of consumers who are not common to Spotify and vice versa. And that is the power of co-branding, wherein you get the consumers from one brand to interact with the other and vice versa. And that's the most important and the most powerful sense when it comes to co-branding. If I would ask anyone who are present there, with what particular product is being marketed here? Out of looking at the picture, what can you think of? And you may just type in your responses. You see a very beautiful picture, a couple in the picture. And if I ask you, what possibly can be the product? Someone says tourism, mine says tourism. Okay. Manga says tourism. Anyone else? So tourism is one. What industry are we looking at or what product are we looking at specifically? And mine, perhaps you can just read out if anyone is typing in any responses before I move on. Anything different? Very quickly, anyone, just type in. What do you feel? What product are we talking about? Staircase, hotels. Okay, so Radhi says staircase. Shreya says clothing. Okay.
Yeah.
Camera is Anshul says. Spa is what Sai says. Okay. And I think I can read the responses that are coming. All right. So all of you are not even slightly closest to the answer. The answer is it's a financial product. Now all of you must be wondering, how can this be a financial product? Well, let me tell you, this is the power of co-branding and associated with co-branding, co-marketing. This particular ad is of American Express along with Instagram. So the couple who had actually shot this photograph actually are in marketing, are influencers, social media influencers who had sort of collaborated with American Express to click pictures and post it on Instagram in partnering with Amex. So the idea is Amex is not sort of marketing their credit cards or open an account or maybe a mobile app. What they're saying is we are giving you an experience through this particular picture. And the whole experience is actually being co-created with the help of Instagram. One example, and that's I'm saying how powerful the whole idea of co-branding or co-marketing. However, both of them are very different terms, used interchangeably a lot of times, but that's the essence of co-branding, and we'll get into this in detail. Why exactly Amex did that, or why exactly there was such kind of a partnership. That's from Instagram Amex UK. So the client that I was talking about with whom we had collaborated said, we want to identify potential partners and we want to identify areas for collaborations with multiple other players that exist out there in the market. And that was the whole problem statement. With the help of co-branding, can we create such partners? Can we create such collaborations? So there is a concept which is called as a transaction level data whenever we're looking at co-branding as a concept. What is exactly this transaction level data is? And I'll take a very simple example. Let's assume there is a consumer who wishes to purchase something. It can be anything under the roof. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One is the person goes through to a physical shop in order to purchase this particular product. Or the second is the person purchases this particular product online. through the mobile application or through the website. Now, there are multiple relations that are also possible. The person first goes to the physical store, then purchases it from the online and vice versa. But again, as of now, in order to avoid any complications, I'm just looking at a straightforward model wherein the purchase takes place, through these two particular mediums. Now, what a transaction level data essentially talks about, also called as the feed level data, and then how exactly we create the output using a software called as Magnitude. We'll look into the details. Now, what they say is the same set of consumers, the transaction level data that we captured with the help of the banking client were the unique ID, which is very unique, as the name suggests, to every individual who is transacting either online or offline. Now, how do you capture the offline data? So, for example, if you walk into a store, if it's a cash transaction, it is very difficult to capture for a particular retailer or for a particular bank. However, at that point of time, if it's a transaction using your credit card or your debit card or your wallet, it is captured through the POS devices, which is the point of sale devices. So every consumer has a unique ID. What we captured was of those set of consumers, the date of transaction, the time of transaction, the platform. Now, again, as I said, the platform can be online, it can be offline. When you talk about online, it can be credit card, debit card, so on and so forth. Mode, again, is another important element, and I'll take an example to explain that. What is the amount that was charged, the category that was being purchased, the account in which the current consumer holds an active savings account, and also the provider. So, for example, this is a unique ID assigned to, let's say, me. I just walk into Amazon.com and I purchase Amazon.in, and I purchase something. There's a unique ID that is assigned to me. Date is 20th February 2021. There is a specific timestamp that gets assigned to it. Platform is online, so I purchase something through my mobile application. Mode was the mode of payment, which is credit card. I purchased something worth 10,000. What I purchased was multiple electronic items. Account was HDFC because I have a savings account in HDFC, and then the provider was Amazon.in. Now, this is the transaction level data that I'm talking about, which is captured and which we also captured of multiple users, who were consumers of that particular client that I'm talking about, or with the help of that particular bank, various gateways, POS devices wherein that transaction happened. We had collected a huge amount of data, which is also called as the feed data from multiple platforms. Now, the most interesting part about this unique ID is the moment you access this unique ID, it will give you for that particular consumer the breakup of this 10,000. Now, quite possible I might have purchased a mobile phone worth 10,000, but what if I've purchased multiple electronic items worth 10,000? So this unique ID gives you an access to whatever elements of products that I purchased, which totaled up to 10,000, and these are the list of products which I have purchased. So, for example, I might have purchased, let's say, an earphone. I might have purchased a case for an earphone. I might have purchased, let's say, a pen drive. So, what exactly totals up to 10,000? And this is one example of electronics. Just imagine if you look at the data of, let's say, of the past 6 months of hundreds of consumers. Just imagine the quantum of the data that we're talking about. This for one user looks so complicated, but if the moment you combine all the data, it becomes very difficult to deal with. Data is important, but something which is even more important is how do you make sense out of that data? So what we did was, for this particular client of ours, we created multiple categories. All right. For example, you want to identify areas, you want to identify partners. Me, along with the team, which was the strategic initiative team of the bank itself, sat together and identified what are the variables we are looking at. How do you really want to identify your potential areas, or how do you want to identify the set of consumers that you would want to target at the end of the day? Because if you want to create a co-branding strategy, you need to identify who are the sets of consumers that you would be targeting. A co-branding strategy would not exist if you do not know who exactly are your target audience. So, for example, we identified the gender, age, marital status, occupation, monthly income, digital maturity score. This tells how literate a consumer is with regards to the digital platforms. Mobile banking usage levels, online usage, shopping usage levels, preferred modes of payment, categories that they were purchasing, transaction level data, so on and so forth. And what we created was, identifying these set of consumer segments or these set of variables, we created with the help of a mapping software, we created a set of consumer segments basis their spending power. So the boxes that you see on your screen represent the density of consumers. So for example, there are multiple shades that exist: red, yellow, green, gray. These are all set of consumers who are very similar within themselves, but very different the moment you compare it with others. So they are very homogeneous, which is similar. The ones marked in gray are very similar in their characteristics: what they're purchasing, what are the modes that they're purchasing, what are the banks that they have an account with, what is their their favorite categories that they're purchasing. Are they purchasing something which is very similar? Similarly, the ones who are marked with red are a different, distinct set of consumers who are very similar within themselves, but way different as compared to the ones marked with a gray or a green or a yellow. And the shade or the intensity of the color represents the average user spending, which is the ARS. So the brighter a particular box is, it represents higher spending capacity of that particular consumer. So basis the software, after doing the map, and again, it's like a Tableau on steroids, the particular tool that I'm talking about. It's an in-house tool that we had used, and we can have access to that. That should not be a problem. The whole idea is, once you've identified the information, you bucket the various heads, feed the data into the software, and then basis the layout, basis the output, the way you want, the way into color, the way you want to represent it visually, that completely depends upon you. So as I said, data is important, but how do you use this particular set of data is equally important. Now, after identifying these set of consumers segments, there were 5 distinct segments that existed. I will not touch upon all of them. I'll just touch upon 2, and then I'll tell you how exactly the co-branding came out. The first segment that we identified was someone called as the progressive adopters. Now, the screen in front of you gives you the entire summary of these set of individuals. Who exactly are they? What exactly do they do? So for example, Kanan, who was from Delhi, female, 21 years, college student, income was pocket money, and there were multiple other individuals very similar to Kanan. If you look at on the right hand side in the middle of the screen, she was high, or consumers like Kanan were high on digital maturity, slightly on the lower side as their mobile banking is concerned, but very high on online shopping. Now a question that comes up is, these guys shop so much online, but they do not have enough money to spend. Why? Because they're too much dependent on their parents. Similarly, different set of characteristics have been highlighted in terms of the internet use, the banking usage, online shopping preferences, category purchase. Now, this particular set of consumers is very important for the bank. Why? Because they might not have the money at this point of time, but 5 or 10 years down the line, they can be the higher spenders. Why? Because they will have money. So if the bank gets hooked to these set of consumers, make them a loyal consumer base, going forward, they will be way more profitable as compared to a bank perhaps which only focuses on a set of consumers who are earning now. But these guys will not be earning 10, 15, or maybe 20 years down the line. And that is where most of the bank misses out. What they focus on someone who is giving us money at this point of time, rather than focusing on someone who potentially will give us money 5 or 10 years down the line. The second segment that we identified were passionate affluence. So someone who typically work in a multinational, have a very high income, their spending capacity is way higher as compared to the first segment that we identified. If you look at the characteristics, all the characteristics are mentioned in terms of the internet use, the mobile banking use, the shopping preferences, and the categories being purchased. Similarly, there were 3 other segments that we identified that there can be a co-branding strategy which can be centered around these 5 set of consumer segments. So what was the outcome? The outcome was a co-branding framework which identified all the segments that I just talked about, and we'll just focus on the first 2. And we came up with the finding that there are 5 broad areas that the client should focus on, which is travel, online commerce, lifestyle, food, and fuel. Because at the end of the day, everyone needs to get their cars or their vehicles fueled. So these are the 5 elements, but these 5 elements differed as per the different segments. So if you look at the progressive adopter, which was the first set of categories, online shopping, lifestyle, and food was of the most importance to them. Wherein, on the other hand, the ones who have the passionate affluence, travel and food were of importance to them. Similarly, for liberal users, for cautious seniors, and for the disengaged conservatives. So these were all the areas that were identified based on the software, and of course, the thought process that had gone behind it, that where exactly can you create that co-branding strategy, or how exactly can you identify those areas or those channel partners. These are the whole set of banking, these are the whole set of banks with which the consumers had an account with, or they were transacting either using their credit cards or using their mobile banking, or maybe a debit card, or maybe mobile wallets. And these are the set of potential partners that were identified across the broad areas, which you just look in the middle of the screen, which is travel, retail, lifestyle, food, and fuel. Now just imagine, it's also an important question, why would or will our client partner with, let's say, Make My Trip, or will they partner with a Yatra or a Bookings.com or a Vistara or a Jet Airways? Now Jet Airways is no longer there, operational, but at that point of time, the whole idea is, how do you take a call? How do you take a decision? And that is where the transaction level data comes handy. Where exactly are your consumers spending? Where exactly are their set of consumers spending? And is there an overlap? Can there be a synergy that can be created so that you type the right set of individuals, the right set of attributes? What were the outcomes at the end of the day? That is, how did the co-branding take place? And I leave it up to you guys. You can message me towards the end or email. What are the 4 companies that I'm referring to? Who potentially can be that bank that I'm talking about? Who potentially will be the airlines and the lifestyle partner? So the first product that these guys actually came out with was a co-branding airlines. So the first thing that they did was co-branding partner, which was in airlines. In 2017, if you look at the penetration of this particular bank, it was somewhere close to 2.3% of the credit cards. Now, when I say co-branding partner, what I'm saying is they came out with a co-branded credit card with one of the airlines in India. Within 2 years of the operation, the penetration of this co-branded credit card increased to somewhere close to 7.8%. Within 3 years, sorry. Why? Because they identified a channel partner, they identified an airlines which actually complemented. And if you go back to the example which I shared before, which is American Express with Instagram, it is not about having an airlines. It's about giving you an experience of visiting or of traveling. Checking into a lounge at any of the airports, and then finally, going to your hotel. It's all about the experience. So what this particular bank did was it actually focused a lot on the experience part rather than only the transaction. The second co-branding partner that they identified was a lifestyle player. And as a result, what happened was in 2017, 1 in 10 consumers were using the mobile banking app of this particular bank. Within 3 years, 5 out of 10 consumers started using the mobile banking app. Why? And just try and understand the first set of consumer, which was Kanan. The consumer was using mobile banks, wanted cash back before any purchases, very high on online shopping, but had no money. So what they did was, through multiple partnerships that they created, they started giving cashbacks to the consumers only if they use the mobile app. And as a result, the penetration of the mobile app increased. The set of consumers who were using it increased exponentially. And that is when they partnered with these two different set of segments. Similarly, there were 3 other partnerships in the form of co-branding that happened with 3 other players for the 3 set of segments that I just talked about. So in a nutshell, this whole exercise resulted into 5 co-branding partners and 5 broad areas where this particular client partnered with. As I said, one of the most important observation is a lot of banks, and while we were discussing this, an output was, college students, there is no point in giving them a credit card because they will not be using it. And that is where most of the banks sort of miss out on a potential opportunity. As I said before, they might not have a credit card now, but if you give them the right set of experience, if your bank is first on their mind whenever they want to bank, whenever they want to do any transaction, few years down the line, your bank is going to be the preferred choice. Because in today's time, consumers are high switchers. They've become high switchers, Generation Z or millennials, even if you look at in the later half of millennials. They might have a bank account with one particular bank, but they use mobile applications of other banks. Why? Because they see there is more benefit using their accounts or their applications. There is more opportunity there. But what if you give them an experience wherein any transaction that they do, your bank comes first, whether it's the credit card or the net banking or the mobile applications. So 5 and 10 years down the line, what you're doing is a set of consumers who really are going to have a higher average spending are going to be your consumer base, plus they're going to be a loyal consumer base. That is the opportunity which multiple organizations can tap with the help of co-branding. Why? Because you market yourself with the help of a potential partner. Your marketing costs also becomes half. Why? Because both of you are doing it rather than both the elements doing it individually. And that is how it is important for any organization to co-brand and eventually co-market themselves. That is pretty much from my side. I think I've stick to my timeline of 30 minutes. If anyone has any questions post this discussion, what you can also do is you can drop me an email. My email ID is anujkapoor@iitj.ac.in, and I'll take all the questions. Now, let me just first log out from the screen. And now let me take the questions one by one. And
thank you very much.
Most welcome, most welcome. And if I miss out on any question, do let me know.
Yeah, there is one question I see from Lankesh about not a question. It's co-branding means all about increasing the income and interest via marketing. Is it what co-branding means?
All right. So, all right, Lankesh. So, in very simple words, if you ask, is it all about creating interest? I would say yes. It's all about creating interest. It's all about creating awareness by bringing in the best of both the organization. Is it all about increasing revenue? At the end of the day, if it's a business, there has to be revenue. Otherwise, the business will not be successful. There has to be a profit. So absolutely, co-branding in a nutshell links with higher revenue, higher income, more interest, more opportunities. Now, Avinash has a question which says, what are the limitations of co-branding? So again, Avinash, it really depends upon what kind of co-branding are we referring to. So as I said, within co-branding, there are concepts such as ingredient co-branding, in-house co-branding, so on and so forth. So again, the limitations would vary, but a few limitations which are very evident in today's time is one, the brand image of one partner can actually take a hit or spoil the brand of the other. So for example, if two brands collaborate on a particular project and because of some reason, Myntra, let's take for example, they were in news for multiple reasons. Now, a lot of their partners might want to sort of detach to them. Why? Because they're getting a negative publicity. So in co-branding, what happens is if one particular brand takes a hit in terms of its image, there is a higher possibility that the other might also. That is, I think, one of the biggest limitations when you talk about co-branding. Second is, if HDFC Bank has partnered with, let's say, Flipkart, at the same time, they can also partner with Amazon, but there are multiple limitations that comes in because of the data issues. So I think that is also a second limitation wherein how exactly you identify who you're going to partner with becomes really very important because there can be multiple compliance issues that might come up.
Thank you, Dr. Anuj. There is another question from Aditya. It's a time span of a co-branded product.
All right. So there is no thumb rule, Aditya, in terms of what is the time span. It all depends how fast or how quickly are you understanding your consumers and the elements. If you look at the fastest co-branding that has happened, it has happened in 6 months, wherein a company came up or there was a co-branding effort within 6 months. The maximum that can take is around 3 to 4 years. When SBI, I think, had launched their co-branded credit card with Ola, it took them around 3 years plus to come out with that particular concept. Didn't do that well somehow, fortunately or unfortunately, but there is no thumb rule. It says it all depends how fast you want to move. It can be anywhere between 6 months to, let's say, 3 to 4 years.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful insights. I would like to ask, what are the disadvantages of having a co-branding marketing strategy instead of going independent, doing independent marketing?
And this question has been asked by Shreyas.
Yes, sir.
All right, Shreyas, as I just mentioned to one of the questions that were asked by someone, the moment you co-brand, there are two brands who are going in tandem. So the image of one directly or indirectly affects the image on the other. Of course, your marketing costs are halved, which is a good point. But the negative point is, what if the product doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
both the brands lose out on their equity in to put it in simple words, which is their value per se in the minds of the consumers. That is one. If anything wrong or bad happens with one brand, since they're co-branding with another one, by default it takes a hit. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's suppose Jet Airways tied up with HDFC Bank. Now all of a sudden Jet Airways had gone, they were just out of the picture. Of course, there was a different concept that they started off with, which was intermiles. But the idea is the moment Jet Airways is gone, a lot of people will start feeling, I've been cheated because Jet Airways is gone. Now what I'm going to do with this credit card of mine? And they perhaps would write multiple complaints to HDFC Bank, and HDFC Bank would be in no condition to help them because they do not have a partner anymore. And as a result, the image or the so-called the brand image of HDFC also takes a hit. Right. So as I said, anything bad happens with one player, that is then as a
Mm-hmm.
result, the effects can be seen on the partner player as well.
Yes, yes. And sir, can we link the investment of Microsoft into Apple during the 90s as a co-branding effort?
No. So again, Shreyas, if in to give you a very simple thought, if the combining of two brands coming together basically is creating a new product or a new service, that's a co-branding. If it is only being used to market, to increase the visibility, that is co-marketing. So what you're referring to is if Microsoft invested in Apple and they came up with a new product, which is jointly a new product, that will be co-branding, which was not the case. So that will not come under co-branding.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. There are a couple
Sai,
of questions coming up, Dr. Anuj. One question is from Akshat Pujara.
okay.
It's about if you see the number increase in, perhaps he means the number of customers. If you see, if there is an increase in number of customers, say, for example, how can we say it is because of co-branding only?
All right. Good question, Akshat. See, again, there are two ways of looking at it. One is if you have created a co-branded credit card, then with the transaction level data, which I just talked about, it'll be very easy to identify whether that card is being used to purchase something. If yes, then you know you've got the answer. Second is if you come up with something wherein the transaction level data is not uh, being measured, then of course the platform at which you're making the transaction, data from that is the only way where you can identify whether that is because of co-branding or not, right? And that is a tricky proposition. That is always the case. If there is no finite way of saying, oh yes, this is because of the co-branding effort, because there are multiple efforts going in. And that is why a lot of organizations focus on a co-branded credit card or basically a co-branded debit card, nowadays mobile applications, so that they can track whether it is because of the co-branding or it is because of something else. I hope I've answered your question. Sai Chaitanya has a question and he says, isn't it illegal to have the database of all the customers in a company because it can lead to fraudulent activities like employee can take an? Absolutely it is, Sai. And that is why it is becoming one of the biggest challenges in today's time. And if you go out, times are way different back then as compared to now. Now, if you go out to a company and say, I'm working on something, would you help me in getting the information of your consumers? They'll straight away say no. It's very difficult. It is very difficult. And that's why I say there are multiple signups, there are multiple MOUs, there are multiple compliance documents that are needs to be signed that if at any point of time it is identified that you've used the data in the wrong or in the incorrect fashion, you're going to face multiple legal implications. So yes, it's always a tricky proposition, but I think every company have their own risk management frameworks in place in order to make sure that the data is not leaked out.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Anuj. I think we're done with the question answer that's in the chat box. If anybody else has any other question, please unmute yourself and you can ask Dr. Anuj.
Yes, please feel, I still have some time left. Feel free to unmute yourself. You can ask if you have any questions, any doubts. I've already given you my email ID. Even if you have any concerns at any point of time, feel free to drop me an email.
Okay, Kathy is posting, how does co-branding differ from merger?
All right, so it's a completely different ballgame, Kathy, altogether. See, when you look at co-branding, as I said, every brand have their own set of identity, which is not getting mixed. The moment you do a merger, it gets diluted. Here, an HDFC Bank vis-a-vis, let's say, a Flipkart, they're both going to retain their own identities, and co-branding is time bound in the sense if co-branding takes place, depends upon the contract, 4 years, 5 years, 2 years. In mergers, that is, to the best of my knowledge, that is something which is not defined per se. So co-branding, as I said, it is a form of collaboration wherein you cut down on your marketing efforts, but at the same time increase on the consumer basis, right? And it is, of course, time bound. On the other hand, mergers, it's a completely different ballgame altogether. The identities are being merged, something new is being created, a third product which has an identity of its own. Wherein in this case, there is a third product which is being created, but with the help of the identity of the first two players. I hope I've answered your question, Kathy.
Yes, Dr. Anuj, I think this question has been answered.
Perfect.
Yeah. So if there are no further questions, maybe we can close it for today. Yeah.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Dr. Anuj, once again for taking us through the concept of co-branding and how companies do it with the help of data. Right. So I request all the participants here that we have multiple such masterclass sessions coming up. For tomorrow, we have a person from McKinsey going to talk to us. So you will receive a link, the meeting details very soon from our side, and please make sure to join the session tomorrow.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Mang. Thank you so much, all the participants. Wish you all the very best with all the subsequent sessions and master classes. Wish you all the very best. Have a good day.